Always this thing that happens. We're live. Anyways, the art of rhythmical composition, written or spoken for exciting pleasure by beautiful, imaginative, or ele- uh, elevated thoughts is known to be as poetry. Uh, and who is a poet? When it comes to the poet, a poet is the one who composes poetry and who has a gift of poetic thought, imagination, and creation, together with eloquence of expression. Poet has the power to influence the society and can bring about remarkable changes, yet he is mostly unacknowledged, as their work is not directly reflected in the society, and people are mostly are ignorant of their contribution to their in general in the societal development. uh, Welcome, hello my dear friends and esteemed luminaries, guest of honors and whatever. Please, my dear friends, welcome to the Poets Talk About the Poets, sixth edition of Songs of India. uh, this program, which is highlighted, came out to highlight the Indian language poets and their contribution to the realm of literature. Uh, 2 months back, we started this program in the honor of Jayanta Mahapatra, like in August. It's uh, a fortnightly program, so but sometimes dates varies. But yes, there's we had this completed 5 editions, 5 episodes, whatever it is, and the 4 panel members would be discussing about their poets of their choice, and each member would be given 15 minutes to present the poet of their choice. They would basically talk about the poets, and they highlight their works and their contribution. In the last episode, we talked about a Telugu poet who was Chellam, Gudipata Venkat Chellam. He's been spoken by Dr. Srinivas Vasudev, and Dr. Kumud Bala ma'am has spoken about Subhadra Kumari Chauhan, a Hindi poet, and Lopa Mudra Banerjee talked about Mallika Sengupta, and Narendrajit Kaur talked about um, Dev Patel. It was in his remembrance. It was in my last program held on December 21st. And today we'll be having, today we'll be talking about Sarojani Naidu, who would talk, I mean, the poet who would be talking about the same would be Dr. Miss Niharika Chibbar and Aurobindo Ghosh would be talking about by Dr. Anasuya, Kumar, Urvashi, Dr. Urvashi M. Pandya will be talking about a Gujarati medieval poet, Ganga Sati, and our own Dr. Roopali Sarkar Gaur would be talking about Harendranath Chattopadhayay. So without wasting much of time, let us begin with our guest poet. It's such an honor. It's Niharika Chibbar. Niharika Chibbar is an Indian-born public diplomacy specialist in United States Civil Service. She is also a prize-winning published poet and a writer. Her work is in a variety of printed anthologies and online in different throats and American Kahani. She serves on boards of Youth Under Voluntary Action for Transformation India and DC South Asian Arts Council. Niharika speaks several languages and holds a master's in international relations from Johns Hopkins University, SAIS in Washington, D.C., and an MA and BA in Japanese from the Jawaharlal Nehru University in India. Today, she would be talking about Sarojani Naidu. I would love to welcome Niharika Chibbar to talk about the thing.
Thank you so much, Prasanna. And namaskar, dear friends. I want to start out by thanking the brain behind Fertile Brains, Mr. Prasanna K. Kumar, for inviting me here today. and being invited to speak about Bulbul-e-Hind, Sarojani Naidu, the Nightingale of India, has really made me think. It's given me a chance to reflect. You see, so I'm a student of literature who then studied international relations and got involved in politics. So this really made me think a lot, and I had to study a lot before I showed up here. So you see, here in the United States, we tend to talk about something called the greatest generation. This generation lived through and experienced the hardships of the Great Depression. Many of them fought in World War II or worked in industries that contributed to winning the war. These individuals perhaps our parents, grandparents, or our parents' parents have often been described as driven, patriotic, and those who brought their nation together. So as we gather here today to engage in a thoughtful exploration of the tide-turning revolutionary poets who fought for India's independence, I would like to highlight India's greatest generation, the generation that lived, loved, wrote, and fought for freedom in the late 19th and 20th centuries. The generation that found expression in the courageous acts of the likes of Lokmanya Tilak, Lala Lajpat Rai, Gopal Krishna Gokhale, Bipin Chandra Pal, Mahatma Gandhi, Sardar Patel, Subhash Chandra Bose, Sarojani Naidu, a prolific revolutionary generation of poignant writers and passionate orators. So amidst this tapestry of courage and sacrifice, I am here to pause and celebrate the life of Sarojani Naidu. She was born in early 1879 in Hyderabad and not only carried the mellifluous moniker of the Nightingale of India for her color, her imagery, and her lyrical quality of her poetry, but she also emerged as a formidable force in the political arena, paving the way for future generations of women leaders and of women. Her literary brilliance, showcased in works such as The Golden Threshold, is a collection of 63 poems. It was more than just an artistic expression. It was a poignant call to arms, resonating with the aspirations of a nation yearning for freedom. Reminded that much of India celebrated harvest festivals this week, I've selected a poem called The Harvest Hymn from The Golden Threshold. The poem speaks in three voices. First, men's voices. Lord of the lotus, Lord of the harvest, bright and munificent Lord of the morn, thine is the bounty that prospered our sowing, thine is the bounty that nurtured our corn. We bring thee our songs and our garlands for tribute, the gold of our fields and the gold of our fruit. O giver of mellowing radiance, we hail thee, we praise thee, O Surya, with cymbal and flute. Lord of the rainbow, Lord of the harvest, great and beneficent Lord of the main, thine is the mercy that cherished our furrows, thine is the mercy that fostered our grain. We bring thee our thanks and our garlands for tribute, the wealth of our valleys, new garnered and ripe. O sender of rain and dewfall, we hail thee, we praise thee, Varuna, with cymbal and pipe. Next, women's voices. Queen of the gourd flower, queen of the harvest, sweet and omnipotent, O earth. Thine is the plentiful bosom that feeds us, thine is the womb where our riches have birth. We bring thee our love and our garlands for tribute. With gifts of thy opulent giving we come. O source of our manifold gladness, we hail thee. We praise thee, O Prithvi, with cymbal and drum. And now all voices speak. Lord of the universe, Lord of our being, eternal Father, effable Om, thou art the seed and the scythe of our harvest. Thou art our hands and our heart and our home. We bring thee our lives and our labors for tribute. Grant us thy succor, thy counsel, thy care. O life of all life and all blessing, we hail thee. We praise thee, O Brahma, with cymbal and prayer. So if we were to reflect upon the tapestry of Sarojani Naidu's extraordinary life, a life marked by eloquent speeches, poignant letters, and a relentless commitment to India's fight for independence, we would find not only that she was a gifted poet, but she was a freedom fighter and a powerful speaker. Before she joined politics, she had already made a name for herself as a poet and captured the attention of luminaries such as Rabindranath Tagore. In fact, when she was 12 years old, she wrote a play in Persian, in the Persian language. It was called Mahir Munir. This impressed Nizam Mir Mehboob Ali Khan of Hyderabad so much, he awarded her a scholarship to study in England at King's College. So even though she came from somewhat of an illustrious family, as a woman, as a girl, there would have been no way that she would have been able to go had it not been for her writing. So she became an activist, and as an activist, she had a knack for identifying and collaborating with female allies who were as strong as her. She was able to identify those people. So with Annie Besant, she founded the Women's India Association in 1917. She spoke and wrote of women's rights and focused on women's education, abolishing child marriage. In her book, Indian Women, Padma Bhushan feminist economist Devaki Jain aptly captures the significance of Sarojani Naidu's entry into active politics by noting, her eminence became only an asset to the Indian National Congress, but also became an inspiration to the hesitant womanhood of India, the hesitant womanhood of India. Her willingness to leave behind her home, husband, and children to identify herself with the freedom movement had a profound effect on women, influencing their future participation in the national movement. So much like her poetry, her speeches were eloquent and pure. They're described as pure. They resonated with the common person. They were a blend of honesty and patriotism. During riots in Delhi, she called for unity. And at this time, we need that kind of cry. So I would like you to rest with that for a moment. Let us all offer together atonement for the recent crimes of our own kith and kin against our own kith and kin. And let us strive with humility, courage, and untiring patience to create out of the very substance of disaster and death, lovely and abiding unity of purpose, broad-based upon a noble conception of our common and indivisible national identity. So when we're talking about a unity of purpose and creating substance out of disaster and death, I was reminded of Fertile Brains' publication, Manushatyam, which talks exactly of that. So we are having those same conversations now that we did 100 years ago. So her anti-British activism earned Sarojani Naidu multiple prison sentences. In 1931, she accompanied Mahatma Gandhi to the inconclusive second session of the Round Table Conference in London, demonstrating her commitment to the cause of Indian-British cooperation. So now we're talking Indian-British cooperation, but we're trying to throw the British out as well at the same time. So think about how forward-thinking she was and how she was laying the groundwork, and the public diplomacy specialist in me recognizes that. So I'm not looking at it as a poet, I'm looking at it as, look at these visionaries, where are they? And that's what made them the greatest generation. And, you know, at the time, Mahatma Gandhi became the biggest admirer of her poetry. He's the one who started calling her Bulbul-e-Hind. And on the eve of her return, so Sarojani Naidu was returning from South Africa in 1924. That was 100 years ago. I had to really think about that. And Mahatma Gandhi wrote in Young India magazine to remind Bombay of its duty when India's nightingale returns to delight the Indian ear with her sweet music. And that's how she began to be known. And in the first 3 decades of the 20th century, her poetry was judged as the finest English verse written by an Indian. And the judgment was confirmed by those of taste. And I went back and read that they were all men. So that was very interesting. Those are the only people of taste. in India and in England. English poet Edmund Goss said as an introduction to her second book of verse, The Golden Threshold, which I read from earlier, that she is the most brilliant, the most original, as well as the most correct of all natives of Hindustan who have written in English. Poet Arthur Symons said, her eyes turn towards beauty as the sunflower turns towards the sun. The London Times proclaimed, her poetry seems to sing itself, as if her swift thoughts and strong emotions sprang into lyrics of themselves. And then there was the Manchester Guardian newspaper that said, her simplicity suggests Blake. And the Review of Reviews wrote that her poetry should silence forever the scoffer. And this is, again, somewhere where I really laughed out very loudly as I was preparing this last night. Her poetry should silence forever the scoffer who declares that women cannot write poetry. That women cannot write poetry. So Sarojani Naidu was undeniably a woman ahead of her time, a woman of multiple talents and roles, a poet, a writer, an orator, leader, fighter, activist, liberator, administrator, mother, daughter, and friend. Sounds like a lot of roles, I'm reminded of when I explained to children here in the United States why Durga has 10 arms. It's not because she has 10 arms, it's because she's multitasking and she's multifaceted. And so this is what Sarojani Naidu reminds me of is Durga. She was born during a challenging era when social norms limited the role of women. She shattered these constraints and emerged as a trailblazer. She remained unwavering in her commitment to her motherland. She worked tirelessly, traveling extensively, breaking barriers, and reestablishing self-esteem for India's women. Her poems echoed the soul of India, and as a woman and poet, she presented the weapon of faith, courage, and the shield of fortitude to allow her fellow Indians to one day thrive. Her legacy lives on, and her impact on the women of India endures. In her own words, she declared, as long as I have life, as long as blood flows through this arm of mine, I shall not leave the cause of freedom. She was not just a woman or a poet, she was a beacon of inspiration, flinging out the banner of song and sound, the bugle call to battle. How shall we kindle the flame which shall awaken us from slavery? She answered, I'm only a woman, only a poet. But as a woman, I give to you the weapons of faith and courage and the shield of fortitude. And as a poet, I fling out the banner of song and sound, the bugle call to battle. I thank you for your indulgence, and we'll close with a quick poem of Sarojani Naidu. I'm very aware of the times that we're in, and this poem I selected again from the book Golden Threshold. It seems the most apt for this moment. It's called To India. O young through all thy immemorial years, rise, mother, rise, regenerate from thy gloom, and like a bride high mated with the spheres, beget new glories from thine ageless womb. The nations that in fettered darkness weep, crave thee to leave them where great mornings break. Mother, O mother, wherefore dost thou sleep? Arise and answer for thy children's sake. Thy future calls thee with a manifold sound to crescent honors, splendors, victories vast. Waken, O slumbering mother, and be crowned, who once wert the empress of the sovereign past. Who once wert the empress of the sovereign past. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. That's such an enlightening, presentation, for the Nightingale of India. Sarojani Naidu is considered to be epitome of beauty. I would go across to our moderator, Dr. Roopali Sakarga, to share a few, light upon the presentation.
I don't think I should be doing this. I think we will ask Dr. Anasuya Kumar to make her comments on Niharika's poems. Presentation.
Oh, Oh, well, I mean, that just blew me away, Niharika. That was just awesome. As a child growing up in India, of course, we, in all anthologies in school, we had Sarojani Naidu's poems. It was that era in the post-Nehru years, and she was a staple. And in every child's heart, there was a favorite Sarojani Naidu poem, but you really brought her to life in more ways than I could imagine. That this interesting figure in my childhood imagination, you really brought her to life for me, maybe for the first time. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And I think in my research, as I said, I paused to reflect when I was given this task to talk about her. Where do you begin? And you have I grew up with her too, but it was a poem to learn, it was a figure to know about. But understanding who she was as a woman, and as a woman in that time, writing the way she did, and the barriers she broke in her unassuming way, and that's what strikes me about why I call that the greatest generation now, because they really were.
That's true. That's true. That's so true. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You pause to reflect upon, and poets, the women generally are not considered to be, writing in the, giving their hands in poetry, field of poetry. Those were the days. But still, I think it's there. But yes, thank you, ma'am, Niharika, ma'am. That's such a
Thank
lovely
you so much,
presentation.
Prasanna. Thank
Such
you
a
for having me.
vibrant, I would say. You had this eye contact with viewers too. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Viewers, let us go across to our next panel member who will be talking about, yes, if we should lighting up, Aurobindo Ghosh is a much known, talker about philosopher. I know he's a, it's like, yeah, he's a revolutionary personality. Dr. Anasuya Kumar is a teacher of Sanskrit and English literature with a PhD from University of Copenhagen, Denmark, and the University of Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania. She did her dissertation in Indology on a Danish philosopher who was closely acquainted with Sri Aurobindo in 1915. Here she worked on private journals of Johannes Hollenberg, 1885 to 1960, that documented conversations with Sri Aurobindo on the subjects of yoga and human evolution in history. At present, Dr. Anasuya Kumar lives in Mussoorie in Uttarakhand in a private forest where she runs yoga retreats for groups and individuals. Visitors can also just travel here for rest and relaxation. The website is www.aranyakopanishad.com. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you.
It's an honor having you around.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. It's my first time, so I'm a novice. So please bear with me. And you will be stunned to hear that this is my first time on Zoom. I have gone through all the COVID waves without ever having to go on Zoom. That's part of the experience of living in a forest, that you just you're far from the madding crowds. So I'm delighted to be here. And Shri Aurobindo Ghosh is actually very close to my heart, because my mother actually grew up in the ashram from 1948 to 1954. She was in Pondicherry. And as a child, in our house in Hyderabad, Shri Aurobindo and the mother were very alive and real. So my mother listened to Bengali music. She listened to devotional music from the ashram days. So it was very, very personal to me. And then fate brought me to Sri Aurobindo again in Denmark, when by accident I stumbled upon an old book in Danish, and the front page of this book on yoga by a Danish philosopher had a painting of Sri Aurobindo, and it was dedicated to him. So to my astonishment, I discovered that a Danish philosopher had traveled to Pondicherry and had conversations with Sri Aurobindo. And somewhere in Denmark, these conversations were documented. So my journey as a scholar was to actually find these conversations. The book on yoga was based on the conversations, but the documents themselves were missing. It took me 3 years to find them, and I did. And when I did, then it was like a return back to my childhood, because then everything that I had heard about Sri Aurobindo came alive. But anyway, at this point, I can just say that Sri Aurobindo needs no introduction to this panel and to all of us. He is probably one of the greatest mystic of our times. He's also a revolutionary. He transcends all kinds of genres. You can't really catalog him in any particular category. He just eludes human limits. He's some kind of a, you might say, really, people consider him an incarnation of the divine. So I won't say anything about that, but it's true that his genius is so universal, and he was such a Renaissance man that he is at once one of the most greatest revolutionaries, actually, of India. Aside from, of course, not to second guess Mahatma Gandhi, but the kind of originality of mind and awareness that Sri Aurobindo brought to the Indian independence movement was quite startling. I was amazed to discover that Sri Aurobindo was actually the first Indian in the Indian National Congress meeting to first raise the banner of Swaraj. And it was not a question of petitioning or of moderating with the British, but it was an unconditional call to self-rule, to Swaraj. And he thought that really independence was the independence of soul and spirit. So why shouldn't India be free when every soul was born free? So who could rule India when in fact you can't rule over any soul? So it was a spiritual kind of and a mystical kind of radical sense of freedom. And this is really stunning about Sri Aurobindo, that his notion of freedom is just so vast that it's not limited to politics. It can't be limited to constitutions or to national freedoms. It transcends all of that and covers really the world. He called for world freedom along with the call to Swaraj in India. He really asked for freedom across borders. So India's freedom was not just geographically limited to the subcontinent, but in fact, it was an opportunity for the world itself to become free. And that's kind of the, you might say, scale of his vision. But I'll really begin with a poem. Roopali suggested that this really was a poets panel. So really we should begin with Sri Aurobindo's life as a poet, because it's true that his mysticism is best expressed in his poetry. His politics may be expressed in, say, the Uttapara speech, for instance, which he delivered in Bengal in 1910, which is an amazing, amazing speech, rallying tens of thousands of people at that time, with a very unique sense of what is India's freedom. He identifies India's freedom in the Uttapara speech as Sanatan Dharma. So it's not just a question of political freedom, it's a question of India becoming spiritually free and understanding that it has the universal vision of the Sanatan Dharma. But not to digress, his mystical poetry, of course, consummates in the Savitri at the end of his life. It is the greatest poem ever written, people say, the Savitri. But much before that, he had already begun to write poetry as a teenager in England, and then later in India. The unifying thread, as far as I can find in his poems, is a kind of passion for Shakti. So he was, you might say, a Shakta worshipper. He was one of those few maybe mystical poets in India at that time, writing in English, who openly declared mystical devotion and love of Shakti. Of course, she has different names in his poems, but here is one that is quite distinctive. So this is an early poem written when he was 22, and it's called Bride of the Fire, and it's dedicated to Durga. So here it is. Bride of the fire, clasp me now close. Bride of the fire, I have shed the bloom of the earthly rose. I have slain desire. Beauty of the light, surround my life. Beauty of the light, I have sacrificed longing and parted from grief. I can bear thy delight. Image of ecstasy, thrill and enlace, image of bliss, I would see only thy marvelous face, feel only thy kiss. Voice of infinity, sound in my heart, call of the one, stamp there thy radiance, never to part, O living sun, my beloved Shakti. So here is a beautiful poem that was written when he was very, very young. And you can see that this is a mystic's declaration. Niharika was talking about Sarojani and Naidu being compared to Blake, but here we have the purest expression of a mystic, really inviting the fire of Shakti into his being and setting him free. And the poet declares that he is not afraid to slay his desires. He's not afraid of the transformation that Durga brings. He's not afraid of the death and rebirth cycle. But he invites this fire into his very being to set him aflame. So this is the kind of passion, I think, that Niharika was talking about, the great generation as extraordinary people of both genders, you know, men and women, but they were ignited by something quite unique. And we have to ask ourselves today if we are ignited by such fire, you know, living in very, very interesting times. We are being invited, in fact, to reignite ourselves with this energy, to invite it into our very core of our beings, so we can maybe become warriors of a future earth. We are being called to become earth warriors. We are being called to become peace warriors. There are so many difficulties and our generation faces, but this great generation had a very special fire, and like Sarojani Naidu, I think Shri Aurobindo very much was part of that. But he brought to this great generation something quite unique and exceptional that is very interesting to his personality. His individuality is very interesting because for him, freedom was really the self. Freedom was not just a political charter. Freedom was part of the soul's journey to the infinite, and it couldn't be limited to anything less than that. So he was very clear what kind of freedom, and when he invites the Shakti into his being in this poem so passionately, he's also inviting us to ask what really ignites us in our own journey to freedom. What does freedom really mean in our times? And I think Shri Aurobindo's writings are very pertinent, I think, to our times. So there are, of course, a poem like this is a foreshadowing of Savitri later on in his life. It's the same kind of pattern that goes all, through his life. His poems reflect this mystic devotion to the goddess and to Shakti. It's a notion of femininity and of the divine feminine that any woman would be proud of. I think he was very much for freedom for women. He would probably have not even had any sense of gender division, being completely in the unity of Shiva and Shakti. So in a sense, he is kind of an androgynous mystic. He has both the strong feminine side and also the masculine side. But both of these combine together to indicate for him that freedom of India was nothing less than inviting the divine to incarnate here, inviting the divine to deify the human being itself. That in fact, India's freedom would become very superficial if we did not enter into the promise of our own divinity. And without that, we would be shortchanging ourselves. So that kind of ambitious span of the notion of freedom, that our journey is to become divine and to incarnate the divine here on earth. And that is the true meaning of freedom. And this he goes in very early in the Uttapara speech. I really recommend to people, it's not directly relevant to our conversation here, but I do recommend that people read the Uttapara speech. I was pretty blown away myself when I read it today. I read it about 3 or 4 times, and it was just stunning in its precision and in its clarity, that calling for India's freedom in 1947 or 1945, much later, and with the partition and division and insularities that were already showing up, that Shri Aurobindo, in fact, had a universal vision of freedom. So he's a freedom fighter who really transcends politics, economics, any category that you might think. In fact, he has his eyes set on the prize, that is incarnating divine on earth. Thank you very much.
Brilliant, ma'am. Sometimes, you have put a question that how we really got really ignited in terms of, current times compared to their times.
Yes.
Who followed the Saktaya school of philosophy. It's like Vamachara and this Ramakrishna philosophy, Ramakrishna thing,
Yes.
Such a great personality, having this, independence in self, liberation in the mind and all these things, and that he's having the westernized and the English thing happening around, and his philosophy, and he worked. He written. I believe he wrote that Savitri. When he was it's like he was in the jail, and that was a masterpiece that came out, and. But he equally great goes to his what do you, his wife, who is lifted his soul as well. I believe so. But yes, that is very well presented, man. Thank you. I would go across to Niharika, ma'am, to show her, react on that.
Thank you, Prasanna, and thank you so much, Dr. Anasuya Kumar, for that. I learned, I learned a lot, but I also found myself itching to get up and do something, and shaking people to wake up and do something, because we don't have that fire. And what does it mean to be independent? And Shri Aurobindo talks about the independence, the freedom of the soul. And when we talk about freedom these days, at least in the United States, the skewed ideas that people have of freedom is, I will not take a vaccination because you cannot make me. I will not get inoculated against COVID because I'm free. And I was just struck by, and that's why I say it was the greatest generation. They did not hear, there's people are calling this freedom while endangering everybody else. And those people wanted to save humanity. And so I really appreciate how you laid it all out. I really appreciate the teacher, and you really came out, and I was sitting, and I want to come back to this class over and over. So let me know when you're teaching it again. But I was also, and you referenced Sarojani Naidu, and I remember reading that Sri Aurobindo was a huge supporter of Sarojani Naidu. And he very famously said in one of his letters, wrote so many letters in those days, and everything was documented in these very eloquently written letters that began usually with "my dear sir" to even somebody you hated the guts of. And you signed it, "your faithful servant," or something like that. But he wrote that, that in a letter that he wrote in 1935, he wrote, "Some of Sarojani Naidu's lyrical work is likely to survive amongst the lasting things in English literature. And by these, she may take her rank among immortals." And these were the words that came out of these people. This is what they wrote. They were incarcerated. They fought for the country. They fought in different ways. I'm reminded of Swami Vivekananda and his speech at the World Congress on Religions in the United States, where he addressed the audience in his robes and everything as sisters and brothers of America. We had those people, and now we're not able to agree on whether or not we should be inoculated against a disease that has decimated so much of the world's population, or whether or not we should limit our use of water so other people can have some. And that leaves me, I have a lot of faith in the next generation, and I hope that, I pray that they will come back and save us. But I leave it there because I want others to react as well.
Thank you, Niharika, ma'am. I'm sure you must be frequenting Pondicherry, ma'am, the ashram of, Aurobindo ashram.
I've been to Oroville several times in connection to the research that I had done Sri Aurobindo's journals. Yes.
And where you see that, near to the tomb of, Aurobindo, you
Oh,
get
yes.
absolute silence within, and you
Yes.
feel really, the inner
Yes.
calmness,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So I think you have given a analytical presentation rather than putting it in a kind of a biographical thing, but you put it in an analytical way. That's so beautifully explained. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
ma'am. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Such a
Thank you.
this,
Thank you.
as like Niharika ma'am said, we will have a single. I mean, it's like standalone presentation for about Aurobindo.
I know, I'm coming back to this class.
Man, so yeah, undoubtedly. Yeah. Okay, let's move on to our next guest, and who will be talking about Sita. I mean, Gita Mata, Gita Sati, Gita Sati of a medieval, well-known Gujarati
It's
poet.
Ganga Sati.
Yeah, Gita Sati.
Ganga Sati.
Yes. Dr. Professor Dr. Urvashi Pandya would be talking about Gita Sati, and she is an award-winning poet, short story writer, editor, translator, and is an eminent scholar and an academician. She teaches Gujarati language and literature at the University of Mumbai. She is an established research guide, and she has published 14 books. We would love to hear Gita Sati from her. Please welcome Dr. Urvashi Pandya.
Thank you, Prasanna. Good evening to all my dear poets friends, Miss Niharika, Chibbar, Dr. Anasuya Kumar.
Ma'am, your video, please.
Sir, there is some glitches in network. So at a time, both the thing is not possible.
Okay, go
If I
ahead.
will start the video, then it will my voice will be interrupted.
Go ahead, man. Go ahead.
So thank you so much, and I apologize for the inconvenience. Miss Niharika Chibbar, Dr. Anasuya Kumar, both the moderator, dear Mr. Prasanna and Dr. Roopali Sarkar, and respected organizers. Sir. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude towards organizers for providing me an opportunity to be a part of this wonderful webinar. I am also grateful to my dear friend Padma Madam who have introduced me to this wonderful platform. Today I will be presenting a spiritual work of a Gujarati women saint writer Ganga Sati and her spiritual journey through her poetry under the title The Poetic Expression of Inner Journey by Ganga Sati. The intention is to humbly present a study of philosophical mystic poetry by Ganga Sati, the last renowned Gujarati female saint from Mahapanth Parampara. The historic event of Bhakti movement all over India has completely changed the definition of society, culture, and especially the traditional interpretation of religion, spirituality, and devotion, resulting in the foundation of saint tradition in India during the 13th century. On the other hand, the saint tradition, which is also known as Santamat, was the foundation pillar for the unique forms, new era, and the sublime philosophy of devotion and spirituality. Historically, from the 13th century to around post half of 17th century, in general had been established as the period of medieval Gujarati literature, the span of the much of Indian devotional literature in medieval era is extended till the post half of 19th century. My endeavor is to focus on life and work of Ganga Sati. The reason why Ganga Sati's spiritual journey is the most unique is because she does not merely attain salvation but also takes her daughter-in-law on the path of sublime spirituality towards salvation. The worldly relationship of both the mother and her daughter-in-law, a divine relation, transforms in the divine relation of master and a pupil. The tradition of literature of every period has its own unique values, identity, and forms. The current social milieu to promote literature differs from time to time. Beyond being bound to each other, human life and literature inspire, nourish, and complement each other. Ganga Sati has carried out her own tradition, is known her sublime creative philosophical work. Ganga Sati was engaged in spiritual practice and in expressing the experience of the inner journey through her Padarachana, devotional songs, and social welfare, especially to guide the society towards value-based lifestyle and spiritual journey. According to an authentic research and historical evidences from 1843 to 1894 CE has been considered as the period of Ganga Sati. She was born in a devotee family and the only girl child and the eldest among the 5 children of Bhaiji B. Sarvaiya and Roopali. She married Kasalsang Gohil, the elder son of devotee couple Ramsangji and Bijiba. Panbai, who was her childhood friend, also came with Ganga Sati at her in-laws' house as a Vadaran. Vadaran means an assistant who accompanies the bride when she goes to her in-laws. And later on, Panbai married Ajuba. Ajuba, the nephew of Kafsarsang, who was raised by Ganga Sati. Ganga Sati was raised in a spiritual environment and had a long tradition of her former women saint writers from Nirgun Sadhnadhara, the tradition of formless worship of Mahapant, such as Sati Toral, Sati Loyan, Rani Rupande, Lilambai, Ratanbai, Liralbai Ma, Sati Devdande, and others. Now, after this brief background of Ganga Sati, I would like to present my observations on her philosophical work in Mahapan tradition. The devotional song of Ganga Sati contains more ethical teaching, spiritual messages, practice of meditation, mystic philosophy, and guidance to reach metaphysical objective in the inner mind. Ganga Sati used to recite the mystic knowledge of spirituality through her bhajans in the language that local ordinary folk can understand. Ganga Sati composed and sung her sublime spiritual experiences by using musical instrument Ektara. We can see in her poems that Ganga Sati has 900 years long tradition of Nirgun Sadhana Parampara from Nath Siddhas in 9th and 10th century to Ismaili tradition of 10th and 11th century and Saint tradition means Santmat, which came into existence as a result of Bhakti movement all over the country as a background during 13th century. At the same time, Sufism also was established during 13th and 16th century. This whole tradition highlights the importance of Guru, the master or Murshid in the spiritual practice towards the ultimate truth, towards the Brahm Prakash. Ganga Sati talks about the importance of Sadguru in the path of spiritual journey, methodology of the practice of worshipping the formless, the process to achieve the realization of ultimate truth, and the immense joy of achieving it. Ganga Sati says, Sadguruna Vachanoma Thav Adhikari Panvai Melidyo Antarnu Abhimanare. She says, one can only be deserving of the Guru Mantra to the path of spiritual journey once they sacrifice their ego. The tradition of Namacharan, every bhajan of Ganga Sati starts with Namacharan of Panbai and ends with her own name. The tradition of Namacharan carried out from Nath Siddha era is also continued till the time of Ganga Sati, the pre-half of 19th century. Namacharan is the line of a verse which indicates the name of writer or his or her master. The spiritual knowledge and an experience of divine light Brahma Prakash is not possible without the guidance and blessings of Sadguru. Sadguru not only leads the worshipper or sadhak to the path of spiritual knowledge, but also protect him from the evil elements and the hurdles in the path of achieving the ultimate truth. Ganga Sati addresses her beloved friend and daughter-in-law Panbai that मेरु तो डगे पण जेना मन ना डगे पानबाई मरने भांगी पड़े ब्रह्मांड रे विपत पड़े तो ये वंशे नहीं पानबाई ये तो हरिजन ना परमान रे, which basically means that no matter how hard it gets, Sadguru's mind is steady, untouched and unaffected by circumstances. He is honest, kind-hearted and truth-seeking, and is the Sadguru who can achieve the sublimate light. The name of master, Murshid, and pupil, Murid, both are used as Namacharan in Ganga Sati's entire work. Ganga Sati has also explained the sublime characteristic of Sadguru who leads his Shishya or Sagir to experience the divine joy. She advised the worshipper to obey Sadguru and his order with complete dedication without any doubt. She says, शीलवंत साधु ने वारे वारे नमिये रे जेना बदले नहीं वर्तमान रे. By using the word वारे वारे नमिये रे, Ganga Sati means to follow Sadguru permanently with total dedication. Benevolent saint never gets upset or change in any situation or time without letting any worldly affair affect him. Further, ચિત્તની વૃત્તિ જેની સદાય નિર્મળી રહે એને મહારાજ થાય મહેરબાન રહે. She explained that Sadguru who guides and motivates his follower to the path of realization of ultimate truth is having a pure heart. In third Sanja, Ganga Sati says, I'm not reading this original Gujarati version. I'm just I'm reading the meaning, English meaning. The Ganga Sati says, a Sadguru means who has mind without hatred or too much affection for an individual. He loves every single being in the world. There is no difference in his work and deed. The only aim of his life is to work for the betterment of others and follow the value-based holy life. To conclude, Ganga Sati says in this poem that the sadhak that one has to earn the blessings to Sadguru, who is able to help him to get rid of worldly pains of the circle of birth and death. A benevolent saint is away from all worldly desire and free from pain and worries. He is active only in worshipping Shabad or Sumiran, which helps the sadhak to achieve Anhatnath. And to conclude, the spiritual practice of Ganga Sati's experience of Anhatnath, and to achieve realization of ultimate truth, her sublime poetic expressions, as well as her society-oriented works, are the golden pages of the history of medieval Gujarati saint literature. And I would like to conclude my talk with two lines of Kabir Sahib. पाया कहूँ तो बावरी, खोया कहूँ तो मूर्ख, खोया पाया कुछ नहीं, ज्यों को त्यों भरपूर, लाली मेरे लाल की जित देखूं तित लाल, लाली देखन में गई मैं भी हो गई लाल. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. You could have read it in the earlier on, the lengthy one. I mean, a complete poem in the Gujarati language. That would have helped, highlighted. But thank you for presenting, highlighting that, the poet's contribution and the achievements and, total these things. Niharika, ma'am, or Anasuya, ma'am, I would go across to both. I think, it would be fair, non-fair if we couldn't go.
For me to say, my brain starts again, and these, like I keep saying, I have to come to these classes more. Dr. Pandya, thank you so much for that, because this brought back to, I was thinking, Dr. Kumar talked about the mysticness of Sri Aurobindo, and we're talking about mysticism and how, and medieval India. And so when Dr. Pandya is talking about Ganga Sati, I'm thinking of Mirabai, who lived along the same time in the same region of India. Ganga Sati was in Saurashtra and at that time, and Mirabai was, you know, Rajasthan in the Rajput region, they're intersecting. And so who were these women who were able to do this? I see there's a theme emerging of great people, of great women. And then we go back further into ancient times, and we had Kabir and these mystic poets that their poems had messages about how you should live as a human being, how you should interact in the world, in this interconnected, that you're interconnected with nature, that you don't live independent of nature. Their stories, their poems were parables. They had lessons. You know, they had lessons. They invoked the divine. They talked about human beings being imbued with the divine. And so it's fascinating to be in the presence of that kind of greatness as interpreted by all of us here today. We're in the presence of greatness today, and we still have to hear from Dr. Roopali Sarkar Gaur, because she's going to talk about another great person. So it's very humbling. I'm just very humbled.
I agree. Yeah, absolutely agree. I do agree. What's startling about your presentation, I think, is that the most ambitious undertaking that a human being could take on, that is union with the absolute, with the divine, and yet the utmost simplicity of daily life that comes with it. So as you were talking, Niharika, about you know, that these poets also gave advice on how to live your daily life, on the simplicity of life, on, they were peasants, they were weavers, they were mother-in-laws and daughter-in-laws. They came from the common people of India. Mirabai, of course, was an exception to that, but mostly it is the paradox of the sublime and the ordinary together. I think that's what came through in your presentation, that these women were just your ordinary folk, and yet they were mystics. They had set their eyes on the absolute in the universe, and they were non-dualists. They were uncompromising in their sense of being Advaitans, I guess, is what you are saying, right, Urvashi ji? That they were non-dualists. And this path is very uncompromising, and it's very arduous as a spiritual discipline, to set your eyes on the absolute as formless, and the absolute as so subtle and ungraspable, and yet you are immersed in the daily life of running a household, and of taking care of your daughter-in-law, and of all the ordinary things that people did. So, I mean, that is marvelous that you can live both in the sublime and the ordinary at the same time. I would like to have a taste of that myself. I'm almost...
I think you're already doing that. I was going to say, this sounds like what you're doing, the uncompromising nature of what you're able to do. But yes, but you know, this whole idea of sublime and the ordinary, if we go back to everybody that we're talking about, we don't even have to go back into the 1500s, but even all the others that we referenced today, they were very simple people in their daily lives.
Yes,
but with
Yes.
so much greatness, you know, the
Yes.
man in the loincloth with the stick, the
Yes.
tiny lady wrapped up in a sari and no makeup or high
Yes.
heels or anything. They
Yes.
just went about changing the course of history in a very simple, ordinary way.
Yes, yes, yes. And the theme that comes through in all of this in India is the recurrent emphasis on the divine and the tangible. So it's not just it's not just freedom in the normal sense. It's much deeper, and you touch that and you bring it to life, Urvashi, in your presentation of a simple woman in medieval India, you know, casting her eyes on the infinite and taking her daughter-in-law along on a journey with her. That's just wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. And thank you, Niharika, for your comments.
No, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Prasanna, you should have this class again, okay?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking. You know, you should have the other one too. You know, Urvashi ma'am is there, is always there. I think, yeah, I should, this credit goes to Urvashi Pandya ma'am, because, you know, when I was searching for the image, you know, it reminds me of mirror, like you said, you know, the mirror is having this instrument and this medieval India, and this remind me of the thing, but this name has been different. I mean, it's like me name, yeah. But the entire, you know, the structure and, you know, costume and whatever it is, in a simple thing, it's not,
Mhm.
everything is same. So,
Mhm.
but the entire credit goes to Kusurosi ma'am for, you know, introducing, enlightening about Ganga Sati ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for
This
Thank
is
you. Thank you so much.
actually, Urvashi, that was a fantastic presentation. You brought to us somebody we knew so little about, and this program is really about that. It's not about our poetry, it is the Songs of India. It's called Poets Speak of Poets, Songs of India. And you really brought that song to us today. And it always
Thank
fascinates
you, ma'am.
me that so many women were spiritually inclined and they were really philosophers. You know, they were as these two young women have said, that they are, you know, they were in touch with reality despite being very ordinary, so-called ordinary people. And how we denied women access to temples, access to prayers, access to puja, you know, and it was taken over and appropriated from us. When they originally, you know, you see Lal Ded from Kashmir, we had a talk on her also, and we've had, other writers and, other speakers who are women spiritualists. So thank you so much, Urvashi. You're already a very erudite, scholar, and we're so proud to
Thank
have
you,
you
ma'am.
here today. We're really
Thank you,
proud.
ma'am. Thank you so much for your kind words. Thank you.
Indeed.
Thank you, ma'am. Let's move on to our, you know, introducing, I'm like, yeah, she would be talking about Harendranath Chattopadhayay. I mean, it's like, she's our, what would I say? Let us, I mean, I have n number of, like,
Yeah,
she's my
finally.
mother, aunt, sister, brother, whatever it is, like my mentor. Dr. Roopali Sarkar Gaur is a poet and a former professor of English, professor of English from Delhi University. She taught creative writing at Indira Gandhi National Open University. Dr. Roopali Sarkar Gaur has co-edited 9 international poetry anthologies. Her first novel is forthcoming. She is the head of mentorship program, consultant editor, and columnist at Different Truths, and arts and poetry editor for AWS E Jain and advisor to Fatal Brands. Wow. She is a social activist and writes poetry which draws our attention to the socio-economic conditions around us, as well as poetry for children and travel writing. Her poetry is archived in the Stanford University Pandemic Digital Archives. Her important initiative is Kitab Mera Kitab Ghar, which is a library for children. So today she would be talking about Harendranath Chattopadhayay and his contribution to the realm of literature. Well, over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Prasanna, for giving me this and fertile brains, for inviting me to make a presentation at Poets Meet Poets, Songs of India. To be able to speak about Harendranath Chattopadhayay is a privilege and an honor. I was born in free India. I had no knowledge of what it was like to live in bondage and under foreign rule. Yet the songs and poems which inspired the people of India to continue to be sung in our home. And one of the persons who sang these songs was my father, a military officer. But he was, he grew up in that situation of having a foreign ruler. A song my father frequently sang was Surya Asta Ho Gaya, Gagana Masta Ho Gaya. Composed and sung by Harendranath Chattopadhayay, this song sings of the weary peasant returning home at twilight after a day's labor. It speaks of hunger being a peasant's constant companion. It's still relevant for the struggling farmer. It goes like this, and it's a song that you can go to the videos that are available on the net and you get this in his own voice. And it goes, Surya Asta Ho Gaya, Gagana Masta Ho Gaya, Charo Or Aag Lagi, Dil Mein Khoob Pyas Jagi. सूर्यास्त हो गया गगन मस्त हो गया कष्ट किए बहुत सहन सूर्यास्त हो गया भूख हमें छू न सकी भूख गरीबों की सखी सूर्य अस्त हो गया गगन मस्त हो गया सूर्य अस्त हो गया गगन मस्त हो गया पग पग हम गाते चले मस्त गगन हो गया सूर्य अस्त हो गया गगन मस्त हो गया दिल में खूब प्यास जगी सूर्य अस्त हो गया. Now I would hear my father sing this song so often, but somehow he used to also add to the song, Chalao lathi, chalao danda, hum udayenge apna jhanda, which I could not find on the net. I went on it and looked for Harendranath Chattopadhayay, his song, but these lines are not there. They must have been added later on. And I could never make out what it meant because I was a small child and I heard him. My father sang the lyrics with the added line, which is not recorded on the internet, but is a living part of my childhood. Chalao lathi, chalao danda, hum udayenge apna jhanda. Harendranath Chattopadhayay is the brother of Sarojani Naidu. He came from a very illustrious family. His father was the first director of science that India produced. His mother was a poet. His younger brother was one of the most renowned international communist leaders. And his two sisters, Mrinalini and Suhasini, were also revolutionaries. For years, I racked my head for the meaning of these words. Then years later, one evening, I live in Meerut. In Meerut, watching the sunset in the vicinity of where the 1857 revolution had begun, it came to me that the sun had set on the British Empire. Surya Asta Ho Gaya. Suddenly, after so many years, एकदम से मेरे दिमाग में आया कि ये सूर्यास्त जो है, ये is the sun setting on the British Empire. And the सत्याग्रही जिसके पीठ पे लकड़ियों से डंडों से मार मार कर सत्याग्रह किया था, they are the ones who says चलाओ लाठी चलाओ डंडा हम उड़ाएंगे अपना झंडा. Born in 1898, Harendranath Chattopadhayay belonged to an illustrious family. His father was called Auronindo Chattopadhayay, was India's first doctor of science and a poet. His mother, Baroda Sundari, was a poet. His sister, Sarojani Naidu, whom you heard about, was a freedom fighter and poet and revolutionary figure. His brother, Virendranath Chattopadhayay, was an international communist leader. And his wife, Kamala Devi, was a well-known freedom fighter and revolutionary. Harendranath himself was a polymath, a Renaissance man. So incredible personality. You may have seen him in many Hindi films. He has acted in 18 or 19 movies that are classic Hindi films. One of them is Bawarchi, in which he's the grandfather. I don't know if you've seen these films, Bawarchi, and then you have many others. He was a revolutionary, a poet, a painter, a composer, a singer, a cinema actor, dramatist, a playwright, and a musician. He wrote in English and Hindi. Although he was a Bengali, he never really wrote anything in Bengali, but Tagore appreciated his poetry a lot and translated one of his poems. He wrote in English and Hindi and wrote nursery rhymes for children in Hindi. A well-known political figure, he also became member of the first Lok Sabha, and he was elected from Vijayawada. They lived in Hyderabad, this Bengali family, and he stood for elections from Vijayawada. In 1973, the government of India honored him with the Padma Bhushan. Speaking of the influences in his creative life, Harendranath always spoke of his ancestors. It's very interesting. If you listen to his interviews, which Doordarshan and, the documentary that Doordarshan has done, or the government of India's documentary and all, he says that whatever he is, he has inherited it from his ancestors. All the, particular attributes that he has, he credited his ancestors with it. He believed that we inherit every quality of head and heart from our ancestors. We owe our ancestors gratitude, he said. There are ample videos and documentaries and interviews on him from which we can source his life and literature and hear the great poet read aloud his poems. And he's a very interesting personality. And there's this very classic film, Sahib, Bibi or Ghulam, in which he is the clock keeper. He is the ghadi man. He keeps on checking time. As a cinema actor, he has acted in almost all films that have made a mark. Sahib, Bibi or Ghulam, Tere Ghar Ke Samne, The Householder, Shri Ram Fantush, Pyar Mohabbat, Pinjre Ke Panchi, Raat aur Din, Ashirwad. And Ashirwad has that famous song, Rail Gari, which Ashok Kumar sings. That is also written by Harendranath Chattopadhayay. So there are a number of films that he's acted in. He published his first volume of poetry when he was 19. And the work is titled The Feast of Youth, which drew instant appreciation from reviewers. It's very interesting that, he was a playwright, and the plays that he wrote were performed in Chennai, which is now Chennai, but then Madras. And special trains used to run to bring the audience, because there was such a crowd that would attend his plays. Throughout his creative life, he worked chiefly in English and Hindi. During the Gandhian movement, he wrote songs in Hindustani, which were sung by a large number of people. One of them is called Shuru Hua Hai Jang Hamara. He was arrested and incarcerated. And so, we have this, as you said, as Niharika said, that there's a generation of people, and as Dr. Anasuya said, Aurobindo, Sarojani, Naidu, all these people. And Aurobindo used to, because Harendranath Chattopadhayay stayed in the Aurobindo ashram for 3 years, he would write a poem every day and give it to Aurobindo. And Aurobindo would comment on it. And so there was this, mystical sort of relationship. And there is a poem which touched me and which is very famous, which is called Shaper Shaped. Now, I would like you to pay attention to the transformation and of the perspective of a person. In days gone by, I used to be a potter who would feel his fingers mold the yielding clay to patterns on his wheel. But now, through wisdom lately won, that pride has gone away. I have ceased to be the potter and have learned to be the clay. In other days, I used to be a poet through whose pen innumerable songs would come to win the hearts of men. But now, through new got knowledge, which I hadn't had so long, I've ceased to be the poet and I've learned to be the song. I was a fashioner of swords in days that now are gone, which on 100 battlefields glittered and gleamed and shone. But now I'm brimming with the silence of the Lord. I have ceased to be the sword maker and I've learned to be the sword. So you find the transformation taking place, and these came because of the kind of company they kept, the kind of relationships they had with their, with the people who were living during their time. Poets like Harendranath, Chattopadhayay were products of the cultural flowering of their times, the tremendous morally orienting atmosphere of the freedom struggle and the optimism of ushering in of a more humane era. Everybody believed that once independence happened, things would change. But then there was a disappointment. It was a tremendous disappointment. And in one of his meetings with the Prime Minister, Indira Gandhi, he related this, I'm just reading a few lines from that poem. He says, at the Republic Day parade, since we have organized this, particularly Prasanna and I organized this program for the Republic Day, he wrote this poem and he read it out to Indira Gandhi. Older is marching, the younger is marching, and right through their marching, hunger is marching. Nothing has changed. You see, and that pain that these people felt, that things hadn't really changed. And that drive, that fire, that Niharika said that we must go out and light again. Perhaps the fertile brains, we are trying to do this, light the fire. And we can also go to Aranyaka Upanishad and light the fire there. Take it on from Kumar, who is doing a great job. He was born to Bengali parents, and to be sure, his beginnings were shaped by his parents. He was a Renaissance man, but he had soaked the cultural traditions from across the subcontinent and made himself one with hopes and aspirations, trials and tribulations of the different peoples who inhabit this land. Whether it was the culture of the Nizam of Hyderabad or the influences as wide as Sri Ramana, Sri Aurobindo, other spiritual luminaries of Indian spiritual firmament. I don't want to take up a lot of time. So what I'm going to do is that I just want to remind you that he was also a poet of children's poetry. He wrote children's poetry, and we did mention that, he wrote this poem called Rail Gadi. I'm going to read this out, okay? And maybe we can conclude it with that, because there's so much written about Harendranath Chattopadhayay, but we can read. Our idea is to introduce these poets, not to really say everything about them. So, Rail Gadi. Aao bachcho rail dikhaye, छुक छुक करती रेल चलाए, सीटी देखकर सीट पे बैठे, एक दूजे के पीठ पे बैठो, आगे पीछे पीछे आगे लाइन से लेकिन कोई ना भागे, सारे सीधी लाइन में चलना, आंखें दोनों नीची रखना, बंद आंखों से देखा जाए, आंख खुली तो कुछ ना पाए। आओ बच्चों रेल चलाए, सुनो रे बच्चों टिकट कटाओ, तुम लोग नहीं आओगे तो रेलगाड़ी छूट जाएगी। आओ सब लाइन से खड़े हो जाओ, मुन्नी तुम हो इंजन, टब्बू तुम हो कोयले का डिब्बा, चुन्नू मुन्नू लीला शीला मोहन सोहन जादव माधव, सब पैसेंजर, एक दो रेलगाड़ी। Do we have time, Prasanna, for me to complete this? You have? छुक 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 बीच वाले स्टेशन बोले, रुक 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 रुक, तड़क तड़क लोहे की सड़क, यहाँ से वहां से यहाँ, छुक छुक फुलाया छाती पार कर जाती, बालू रेत आलू के खेत, बाजरा धान, बुड्ढा किसान, हर मैदान मंदिर मकान, चाय की दुकान, पुल पगडंडी, टिले पे झंडी। Am I taking you back to your childhood? टिले पे झंडी, पानी के कुंड, पंछी का झुंड, झोपड़ी झाड़ी खेती बाड़ी, बादल धुआं मोट कुआं, कुएं के पीछे बाग बगीचे, धोबी का घाट मंगल की हाट, गांव का मेला भीड़ का जमेला, टूटी दीवार टट्टू सवार, रेलगाड़ी पी, धर्मपुर करमपुर करमपुर धर्मपुर, मांडवा खांडवा खांडवा मांडवा, रायपुर जयपुर जयपुर रायपुर, तालेगांव मलेगांव तलेगांव, नेल्लोर 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 वेल्लोर, शोलापुर कोल्हापुर शोलापुर. Now you see the kind of involvement in making the children listen to this and take them back. So you can see this writer, the Goregaon, Memdabad, Ahmedabad, Memdabad, beach wale station bole ruk 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 ruk. So I'll end it with this. So this is the versatile poet who wrote in Hindi. He wrote poetry for children. He wrote poetry that was very philosophical, and he was this great poet of our country. Harendranath Chattopadhayay.
Marvelous.
Wow.
Marvelous. Marvelous.
Thank
I loved
you.
it. Loved it.
Maybe Ashok Kumar should be given credit to this. I watched this song on Ashok Kumar show, singing it.
The trains used to be the best thing in our lives, no?
Yeah,
Even
yeah.
now. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
ma'am.
That was
Niharika, ma'am.
delightful.
Urvashi, ma'am. Let us get reaction from Urvashi, ma'am, too. Urvashi, ma'am, please. Uh, maybe she is not. She is having
Where is
trouble
she?
with internet.
Yeah. Actually, I'm speechless, ma'am. Thank you very much for just brilliant talk. And both Tagore and Aurobindo were impressed by his talent,
Yes.
I say. And I am very much happy, and I'm very much impressed that you have connect the work of Harendranath and the socio-cultural environment of his time. So I'm very thankful for that. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Urvashi. Thank you.
Niharika, ma'am, and Anasuya, ma'am. Final word.
Oh, I'll defer to the one who's getting very cold, the warrior who's getting very cold now. And so I'll let Anasuya ma'am go first, and then I have just one small thing to say.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, delightful as always, huh? Irrepressible Roopali. I mean, she really brings this charismatic poet to life in ways that is unbelievable. You really did ignite him, Roopali. Yes, yeah. Talking about the fire, we could see the fire in this guy through you. So you channeled him well, and the poem was just wonderful. Just really enjoyed your presentation. That's all I can say.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And yes, it did bring a lot of memories of trains and that time. I mean, Niharika talked about the greats, but India was really a special time, and the social environment, as Urvashi said, you brought it to life. I mean, trains were a part of our
Yes.
childhood, and to evoke the magic in a child by linking it with a train journey. And I mean, who doesn't know this chime of Kolhapur aaya, phir ye aaya, phir wo aaya, and the chai walas and the idli walas, and that was just it's a brilliant poem,
Yeah.
but you recited it so well.
When the Andhra Express would stop at Visakhapatnam, I think at night around 2 a.m. There was this coffee. And then you stop. No, sorry, at Vijayawada, not Visakhapatnam, at Vijayawada. And then we traveled in that third class compartment. You could lift the thing, got a student concession, so we traveled, quite cheap. And then we buy the coffee, and then we give the money, and the guy would say, "Chillan nakko amma," and the kind of nostalgia that overcame me when she would say that. And I'd say, "Oh, when will I reach Hyderabad? When will I reach my home?"
That's true. That is so true. And it was marvelous. You could travel clear across India in those third class compartments and see.
You could.
Yeah, you could see the whole subcontinent.
And I use those as analogies because sometimes my mother will tell me, do this or do that. And I'll say, well, I can't, I don't have the time. And she'll say, "Nay, you can, ho jayega." And I said, "You're like that guy on the train who comes and sits on the edge of your berth. It's not his berth." And then he says, koi baat nahi, madam, adjust ho jayega.
That is so true. That is so true.
And I said this to her on the phone a few weeks ago, and she said, "Where do you get this stuff?" And it's there, it's ingrained in us. But I want to really touch on this whole idea of ancestors. I am feeling my ancestors in the room. These people that we talked about today are our ancestors. So when Harendranath Chattopadhayay said he receives all of his gifts from his ancestors, that's what we're doing today. We receive these gifts from our ancestors, and our ancestors were not they were not consumers. They were not consumers of information. They were participants. They were active participants. So when they wrote poetries like I become the clay, or I feel the hunger in the belly, or that there is hunger in the belly, they felt it, they were a part of it. And society now has devolved into being consumers. And we are just consuming, and we sit passively and we consume, and we don't know the difference between right and wrong. We don't know the difference between misinformation and disinformation. If somebody has cooked up something and is sending it to us on WhatsApp and telling us, and we're believing it to be the truth, and then we fight with each other over it. We attack each other, people that we've known all our lives, who we've known to be true, whose values we've known to be right and righteous. We attack them because we have consumed something that was incorrect or deliberately designed to deceive on the internet. And this generation, our ancestors were not those people. They were involved, and we don't, if we go back, I referenced Kabir, the poetry of Kabir before, and this is the same sentiment, because he said, Mati kahe Kumar se, tu kyun ronde moe, ek din aisa aayega main rondungi toye. When you become the clay, there will be a time when you become the clay, and we have to remember that. And how are we engaging as human beings with the world that we live in? And so this has been for me it's been a call to action. It really has. This is a call to action, and I really commend Fertile Brains and this venture for doing that, for putting this out there, and for prodding us out of our inertia and saying, get up, chalao lathi, chalao danda. The danda and the lathi have to be chalao so that our jhanda can take the place that it righteously deserves.
Yes. And look at Ganga Sati. I'm so touched by Dr. Urvashi's presentation about Ganga Sati, and the fact that, as you said, as Anu said, and, she herself told us, that somebody so simple, so ordinary. And here, the mother-in-law, daughter-in-law is a big fighting thing. Here she's taking her on a spiritual journey. She's taking her along. What a wonderful thing.
And ma'am, the another wonderful thing is that so there is a tradition, most of the writers keep his or her master's name as a Namacharan. But Ganga Sati keeps the name of her daughter-in-law as a Namacharan. Vijadine Chamakare Mutida Paru Panbai.
Beautiful.
So in every, yes. So it is also very unique in entire tradition. This very unique thing that Ganga Sati keeps not her own name or not her master's name, but a daughter-in-law's name.
I think you should write more about this.
Yeah.
There has to be more about it, because this again goes back to the point that I'm trying to make of these people who didn't just go on with how it was. Aisa tha to aisa hi rahega was not the thing.
Exactly.
She broke tradition. She broke tradition to be involved, to be a part of, and to bring along, to be a part and to bring along. And I think the bringing along is what is happening on a forum like this that Fertile Brains is doing.
Prasanna, you should be very, very happy today. Your objective of having this program has been truly fulfilled, truly fulfilled.
I agree. I
And
agree.
ma'am, the another thing is very actually touched by me by for Ganga Sati, because on that in that time the socio-cultural phenomena was like that. The women may not allowed to even express or share their
Correct.
ideas or thought. And that time there is a huge mass of male followers of Ganga Sati. So Ganga Sati was preaching and addressing the huge mass. So it is also
Fantastic.
very rare in patriarchy society and our socio-cultural this environment. And that time,
But I think it's the mystical
yeah, yes,
equalization before God,
yes,
it is that kind of mystical vision of unity that levels everybody
yeah,
and makes everybody one and equal to each other. So I think they really brought the divine into earth and lived it. And that's what's so remarkable about your presentation, is that it was the living truth of the divine. And therefore anything was acceptable. And I think that is the license that they had, a creative license, a mystic's license, if you will.
license, yes. It is in Mahapanth, and we have another Panth, Satpanth. And in medieval Gujarati, we have very long tradition, long and rich tradition of these female saints who have reformed the society. Many of them involve in this social reformation and many of them I stated in my talk also. Sati Loyan, Sati Toral, Sati Devadande, Liral Bai, Hurbai Ma, Ratan Bai. And there we got three Ratan Bai, various Ratan Bai in various periods. So it is a wonderful tradition of Gujarati female
Prasanna,
saint.
Prasanna, now you have to say a few words. We can then close the show.
Yeah, I was saying in the middle, but yes, I think show must go on in the second episode. Maybe in the the series of second episode, maybe could you have this. But yes, that was today we have Sarojani Naidu, Aurobindo Ghosh, Ganga Sati, and Harendranath Chattopadhayay. Came to know about the significant contribution they left in the society, and the mark, that is something, that is takeaway is something great. I mean, could take lots of things. Like Ganga Sati is something which is very much, for me it is new, and it's like, yeah, for the viewers too, might be. Yes, I think it's time to wind up the show. But before that, let me announce tomorrow we'll be having a book launch by young story viewers who has written Land of Mons, written by Pahel, Lakshita, and Mahasri. They are young kids. I mean, it's like small kids. So please be on. It goes live on YouTube at 9 p.m. Indian Standard Time. See you
Yeah,
there.
three little kids have written a novel.
Love it.
Oh,
Land of
how
Mon.
cute. How
So
cute.
our next poets talk about poets would be tentatively on 31st of January, and see you then, and thank you.
Good night.
Thank
Good
you
night,
so
Thank you
much.
so
everybody. Good night. Such a pleasure.
lovely meeting